I don't see it yet.
Are we live, Mr. Gallagher?
I'm just waiting for confirmation.
Something just came up on mine that says webinar is now streaming live.
We're good.
Okay. Good afternoon. This is the Ordinance Committee meeting of Thursday, June 24th. I had to look at the date at 4 o'clock. I'll do the roll call. I don't know. Tracy's not here yet. Mr. Hamill.
I am present.
Mr. Johnson.
I am here. Thank you very much.
And Ms. Katerina is present. Can we have approval of the minutes from May 20th, 2021, please?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Second.
I gotta do a roll call. I'm sorry. You think I know by now, right? Mr. Hamill,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Katerina is a yes. So that's good. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak? If so, raise your hand.
We have Ralph Larry.
Okay, why don't you bring him in?
Mr. Larry, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Larry.
Hi, how are you?
Good. If you could just tell us your name and where you live for the record.
Sure, I'm Ralph Larry. I actually live in Potomac, Maryland currently.
Okay, and what would you like to speak about?
So I'm the grandson of Marguerite and Leon Larry, and I own the farm in Scarborough on Route 1 that borders the Saco line. The farm has been in our family since the mid-1800s, and we intend to keep it that way. I just wanted to endorse the proposed ordinance modification to allow utility scale solar on my farm. It's absolutely vital for me as a farm owner to have the opportunity to farm solar. Creates a revenue stream for the next 40 years, well beyond my time, which ensures that the property does not become a burden of my sons and heirs. There should be a letter in the committee packet from October 2020 if you'd like further details of my rationale. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at an appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larry. And yes, we have seen your letter, so thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Going. And I guess that's it. All right. So what we will do, since we seem to have, I'm looking at who's here in the audience, it seems to be the solar. Are you folks okay if I flip and we talk about the solar first before the marijuana? Do I have any objections to that? You good with that, Dawn? Dawn, are you okay? All right. That was a thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's go and talk about the solar ordinance. I know I'm going to just start by first of all, I wanted to thank Nick Mazurowski and crew for giving us, Ken and I anyway, a tour. I'm sorry you missed it, Dawn, of what's going on over at I guess it's the Kimberly Clark. I always get confused as to which one's which over there. But I did want to say that I asked Mr. Hall to talk to Jay Chase, who did talk to me regarding, is there something we can do regarding at least moving along solar on the landfill, and then continue to work along on the bigger picture, but at least, getting into the solar on the landfill. And for my fellow members, I don't know if you had a chance to look at along some wording here, but I'm still a little confused. There's Mr. Chase. Jay, we're talking about solar first, okay? So could you explain to me, because I know I was looking for an easy fix at the moment, but I also understand you have to have standards, whatever you call them. And because I was saying, my thought was, can we just add solar, this type of solar to, I guess, utility scale solar, to the zoning ordinance, just on the RF zone, just for landfills only. So could you talk a little bit about what you sent us and what needs to happen and whatever?
Sure, be happy to. So, yeah, as you just said, sounds like after your conversation with Tom and I had a conversation in my office, and it sounded like there was interest to see if it would be possible to look at allowing, as you just said, solar farms on capped landfills in the RF. And so that is so really what I just aimed to do is quickly draft some language that just captured that notion. And so really what that would become, I think, as you're, so what was sent out earlier, essentially you have sort of two applicability standards to consider depending on what the will of the council is or ordinance committee. And certainly you could change that further still. So really you sort of have two options before you, at least as drafted. Again, we can go any number of different ways with it, of course. But originally as drafted, the ordinance authorizes I'm reading utility scale solar energy systems to be installed in the industrial, light industrial, rural and farming, and rural residential farming and manufactured housing in the town of Scarborough. Or the other way of looking at it, and again, based on the conversation I had with Mr. Hall, was to read, this ordinance shall authorize utility scale solar energy systems to be installed on capped landfill sites in the rural and farming districts in the town of Scarborough. So really that's a policy decision for the ordinance committee to make. And once we understand the direction the ordinance committee wishes to take, we can sort of fit the language into chapter 405, which is our zoning ordinance. So really, depending again on which direction you all decide to go from a policy directive, we'll take this language, put some polish on it, just insert the allowed uses in those permitted zones, and then take these standards and make them a performance standard as part of the zoning ordinance. So it's really, again, really waiting to hear what that directive is, and then we'll put the final polish on. Or
Okay,
fit
so
the puzzle piece together, maybe is a better way of saying it.
okay, so for people who are listening, so then this, to do this at this time, we still would need to have this whole document that you gave us for the performance standards. So in other words, we could add the wording into 405, which is the zoning ordinance, which says RF allows for zip, this, and this. Add utilities. I can't even talk English this afternoon. Utility scale solar, but then you have to reference, is that correct? Some sort of performance standards, which would be this document if you were to do that.
So the provisions in this document would then go in the performance standards section of the zoning ordinance. So not dissimilar to how we deal, think of transmission towers, which may be something folks are, committee members might be familiar with. We list which zones they're allowed in, but then in the performance standards, which is section 9 or 10 of the zoning ordinance, it talks about what the specific standards around those are, or similar to farm stands, or how we treat solar for residential use. So again, once we understand your policy directive, we'll just simply take this language and it'll be the same language. It's just where it fits into the regulatory structure of the town is.
Okay, because I mean, and again, I know I'm kind of dominating things right at the moment, but this was my wild idea. This does not mean, in my opinion, that we aren't going to still pursue what we may want to do with these as it was presented by sustainability. My intent is to at least get, the projects that are looking at the landfill, at least give them an opportunity to get off the ground. In part, what interested me about that was I didn't realize till I got a memo from those folks that one of the recipients, I guess is how you want to put it, I don't know, or beneficiaries of the electric that would be generated is the Scarborough school system. So that to me was a real plus. In addition to the fact that I see no reason not to put solar onto the landfills. But what I'd like to do is turn this over, since I've dominated things, to my two fellow members and get their thoughts on how we would handle this. So speak, either of you, go, please be my guest.
No, I agree with what you just said. I mean, I know we know there's a project that's ready to go that we visited. I would like to see that move forward. The ordinance as it stands, I think it needs to be adjusted before it goes to the council. I'm just not sure how or when we do that. I assumed it was going to be, but that was my bad. So, and I'm kind of stuck there, to tell you the truth, because I read the ordinance again today and it's the same as it was last time I read it. So
yeah, and I have to admit, Ken, that I didn't see the changes. I thought you were going to send me what you had sent.
I did. I sent it to Jay and the committee members.
What's that?
I sent it to Jay and the committee members.
This week?
Nope.
Oh,
2 days after the last time we met, because I knew we were
Oh.
going to meet this month. Now, that could be my bad. I'll own that.
oh, no, that's okay.
I thought that's what the process
Yeah,
was.
okay. Well, then what, can we talk, well, Dawn, why don't you weigh in and then remind me, because what I want to then go back to with Ken is what he sees as potential issues. But as far as this going and using, working with the landfill to at least start, Dawn, what are your thoughts on that? And we can go back and address Ken's concerns. Dawn, are you frozen?
Dawn is, don't know what Dawn is today.
Dawn, why don't you shut off your video and try that? Can we hear you?
Where'd Dawn go?
I told him to shut off his video. Are you unmuted, Dawn?
Ken, go ahead.
Uh-oh, there you go. Dawn?
Okay.
Dawn's having technical issues. Uh-oh. I had this happen the other day with someone. I had them call me on the phone, on speaker on the phone. Is there some way we can get Dawn to do that and get it and we can hear him somehow or other?
He can certainly connect audio only through Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he may be trying to, he just jumped out. He may be coming here, trying to come back in.
Yeah, okay. I love technology. It's great when it works.
So can we just generally discuss while we wait for Derek?
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right, let me try again here. I agree with the idea of moving forward on the landfill zone. But I have some questions about just sort of willy-nilly approving this for all of the zones that were indicated. I think there are some questions we have about it. And although I support this in general, just rushing ahead and approving it exactly as recommended by the Sustainability Committee, I think we want to go a little bit more at a more measured pace. So, but I am in favor of decoupling and moving forward with the landfill project. But trying to deal with the other ones, particularly the RF districts, separately, because I think there are other considerations. Were you able to get that?
Yes, we got that. It sounded like you had been.
Could you hear me on that?
Yes, yeah. You were a little dragged.
Any
out.
luck?
Do you
No
want
slow motion. It's like Dawn in slow motion.
Dawn, do you want to try shutting off your
You know, I'm gonna try logging in. Can you just add me?
Well, I think if you shut off your video and just.
So we tried that before, it didn't work. Is that any better?
Yes, that's better. That's way better.
Should I repeat what I said before, or were we able to
No,
get
no,
that?
I got it. I got it. Anyone else?
So that's
Okay.
That's where I am on it. I just think that we need to take this a little bit at a steadier pace. I agree in principle with the reasons for it, but I think there are big implications, big benefits for sure. But I want to make sure we're clear on what we're supporting and what we're approving. So, you know, even in the memo and some of the points that Jamie made in the memo, you know, the fact that it's in the comprehensive plan or the town council has approved that, that's great. But, you know, we're looking for the benefits, you know, the benefits in terms of having another source of energy and also, you know, providing revenue opportunities for people in RF districts. So my order would be a little bit different on some of those, but I think it's all there. I just think there's a question about how we should move forward and in what sequence. And doing everything at once, I think, is a bit of a big bang and a little bit too fast for me. Could just be my own learning curve.
Yep. And I don't disagree with you, and I know Ken doesn't, from what I've gleaned from what Ken says. And Ken, I don't want to speak for you, but yeah, I mean, this needs some further work and, you know, figuring out how we want to implement it in any other zones. But if it's okay, do you mind, Ken, talking a little bit about the changes you would like to see because you had some specific.
Yes.
And I think it had to do with height. Am I remembering correctly?
Well, that was one of them. The height was 35 feet. And again, I was just reconciling to our offsite where I specifically asked that. And I know it was, you know, relevant to where we were.
Yeah.
I do believe the statement saying that they were typically no higher than 20 feet. So I was just trying to understand the difference between the 20 and the 35, because I'm envisioning what we envisioned on our on-site.
Yeah.
And I just can't understand why solar panels would be 35 feet in the air. And if they're 35 feet in the air and we're talking about zoning and residential, farming residential, I mean, that just opens up without seeing a map. Granted, I'll qualify all that without seeing a map. I see that as a challenge. And my biggest concern, I got to get back to it, I'm sorry, was I think the three. Jay, do you remember what I wrote?
I do. I actually have the email before me. So the first, you really had, as I see it, 3 issues. One was the height.
Yep.
The second one you laid out was about setbacks. Potentially, I believe what's in the proposed language is a 25-foot setback. You had suggested maybe we look at a 50-foot setback,
Okay.
presumably for buffering standards or what have you. And then the other item you had suggested was under the standards, there's language that essentially says, to the greatest practical extent, the planning board shall, or no, it says to the greatest extent practicable per the planning board, ... You know, the site should do something or the other. And you're simply, I think your proposal is to, you know, sort of take out the ambiguity and say the site shall do
Correct.
the
Yeah.
thing we say,
Yeah, I mean,
not give that flexibility to the planning board or through the process. So those are really the three that I saw
Thank you.
in your email.
So I thought they were fairly minor, but I was going to rely on Jay to enlighten me why they probably wouldn't be minor. And I don't mean that facetiously, I mean that legitimately. So I read it, I've done a lot of reading about the pros and cons, really can't find many cons on the solar. I support it. It's just, I hesitate in doing anything of set it and forget it. You know, I lean more towards this is to be a contract zoning issue, maybe a fast path process for contract zoning. That's where I am with it currently. However, do agree with what both Don and Jean Marie said about moving this project forward. I don't think anybody would object to that. If anybody went to that site and heard what we heard, they would strongly support it.
So, all right. Sounds like we're all on the same page as far as the landfill piece.
Yep.
Either Mr. Hall or Mr. Chase, what would we do right now to at least move that forward while we continue? Do we have to make those changes to the height and setbacks and whatever?
I guess as I had said in my, and so, I think, not fully appreciating what the process was. I did see Councilor Johnson's email of a few weeks ago, and really, I think waiting to see what the direction and the will of the Ordinance Committee is on those items. I can't speak. Jamie has been much closer with the Sustainability Committee on the details. And certainly, Jamie, feel free to chime in. But I also, based on the conversations, think the Sustainability Committee is, nothing in, changing the height or the setbacks seems to change certainly it changes the standards, but it doesn't change the general parameters of allowing for a solar. But Jamie, why don't you chime in on if there's any issues you see? I don't particularly, but.
No, I think the three items that Councilor Johnson mentioned are, am I muted? Can you not hear me?
No, I can hear you.
A little hard to hear.
Jay, what's the weird face? So I think that those are totally reasonable and don't change the intent. So I don't see any issue in incorporating those into the draft language.
But Jean Marie, just to be clear, this committee ought to be very clear on those points. They can be whatever you wish. So if you prefer what Councilor Johnson's proposing, then you should say so, and we'll make it so.
Okay. I mean, I don't have an issue with what Councilor Johnson is proposing either.
So that
And again, all I would want to do, all I'm looking for at this point is the moving forward with the landfill option, because I do think that there are a lot of questions regarding how we're going to handle it elsewhere. The landfill seems to be pretty clear, if I'm hearing my fellow counselors correctly. So that's where I'm at. John, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Can you hear me better now? Is it any better?
Yeah.
Okay. So to that point, I think that if we take this through for the landfill as a test case, that will give us an opportunity to work through some of these questions. Ken has raised the issue of height and setback. If you think for a minute how we did marijuana, we were very careful in how we applied that to which zones. Okay, we were very, very methodical in how we did that. Sizes of canopies, that sort of thing. So I just think there are going to be implications for different zones. So I'd much rather take one at a time, take this one at a time, and then, we go through, the next ones that are ready to go, try to do it as quickly as we can. But at least it gives us a way to walk before we run.
That's a good way of putting it. Ken?
Yeah, again, if I had the time
And if you can't hear me, I'm going to try another device because I don't know really what else to do here.
No, we could hear you, Dawn. We heard you
We
fine.
can hear you. No, like I said, if I had the time, and I know that's no excuse, I'd go to the zoning map and try to look at what parts of the town, because I don't know them off the top of my head, about what is a rural residential. To me, rural residential is something out by our favorite place, one of our favorite places, Higgins Beach, the Spurwink area. Isn't that rural residential? Right,
Yeah,
so-
there is some there.
So
Yeah.
again, to just drop this into ordinance, say rural residential, I'm sorry. I do believe we had, Allison was on the first meeting, and I agreed with at least her suggestion to look at some type of overlay, if we could do some overlays on it, to get a more clear picture of where these things can go. I'd be more comfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that respect, if I could, Ms. Katerina, are there areas, because certainly that's something staff could work on. I think it would be, if maybe as we talk through sort of the height elements that you brought, it sounds like we're pretty clear on, and I heard committee members are all very clear on at this point, seeking the landfill language, app landfill language that I've heard all three members agree to that. Seems like we have the height item is still on the table. I haven't heard all three weigh in on yet. Setbacks and the sort of standards piece, but also as part of the discussion, if there are sort of areas of the town which committee members say we should be cautious of, staff can start to look at that and try to lay that out for committee members. So I think if you can help potentially frame some of the policy discussion, if that's something you do want to see come back to you. Again, sort of looking for that direction.
Dawn?
One thing I could think of that might qualify as one of those areas that Jay mentioned would be supply. What happens if all of a sudden you have people putting in arrays and it's excess capacity, or they build them and then the demand drops. How long do you wait? I know there's language in there. There's a period of time they have to decommission them or remove them. So there are some questions I have. I know we're assuming there's going to be very strong demand, but we ought to have some limit valve or some way of gauging that so we don't create a problem for ourselves or the folks who want to do this.
But one of the limiting factors that I can think of right off the top of my head is, number one, you got to have three-phase circuit. So, or be within, a certain proximity to that. And if you look in our packet, there was a map showing three-phase circuit. So that's somewhat a self-limiting thing. Another thing we could do is a size of lot, like we did with cell towers. Cell towers are what, 20 acres, 25 acres, something like that, whatever it is. You can do something like that as a limiting factor. So, just because you got 5 acres, you can't do it there, maybe. I don't know, but I'm just saying that's something you could do. And Jamie, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the committee members also that there is a process through CMP that any solar developer needs to go through. CMP needs to approve these to hook into their grid. So that is another limiting factor because they're monitoring what capacity their grid has. And so that will play a role in where solar arrays can go as well.
Yeah, I know I had to do that for my own solar on my house, on my barn. CMP had to approve it, and it couldn't be any bigger than whatever. So.
Is that stated?
What's that?
Stated in the ordinance? I'm sorry, I missed that. Because is that stated in this draft ordinance? that part of the process of a farm is the CMP process?
I don't believe it's explicit in the ordinance, no. It
That might
is,
be worth adding, right? Because that would be a checkpoint really,
Mhm.
even before it comes, I would assume, into us or into the planning board or into the town process.
Except don't use the term CMP just in
Right.
case utilities change.
Right, whatever the controlling
Right.
authority is or
Right.
something.
But that'd be certainly something we could explore, because it wouldn't be too just for similarity, when the planning board goes through a process, if there's a state permit through DEP or Department of Transportation, we require those to, obviously that's not our review authority, but we do get some type of letter of capacity or understanding from them. So I think that's something Jamie and I could explore together, if that's the interest of the committee.
Yep. That sounds good to me. Anything else that we would like staff to do?
Well, what have we asked them to do? Sorry.
So far, I've heard, what I
So
think
what
I've heard is we want to address language on the landfill. But I guess that's really a question to the ordinance committee. If there's an interest in moving language forward to council in sort of the nearer term before we explore some of these things, what I've heard is to really change the applicability to capped landfills in the RF, which really narrows down where they could go. And then I think what I'm starting to hear is that there's an interest to have an ongoing discussion and look at some of these other items in the coming weeks, months, what have you. And that's where Jamie and I can start doing a little bit more work on understanding sort of what, a utility approval prior to, what having sign off by the utility might look like, what that means, how that might behave. Start to look at refining locations. So far, I've heard, at least from one member, potentially, areas around, particularly, Higgins Beach, and I might think maybe our natural resources, the marsh might be areas of concern that you might want to look at overlay zoning that might limit those type areas, as well as this notion of utility access and capacity. And so we can start to explore those things as a separate, like I said, in future meetings with the ordinance committee as your agenda, as you wish to have that on your agenda. But if you want to move forward with this notion of the RF landfills, we can certainly start to move forward with the language we have before us. Again, just fit the puzzle piece right into the zoning ordinance, and we can prepare that package for the next council meeting or whenever council agenda fits it. It would be helpful to understand where the rest of the committee members are, Councilor Hamel and Katerina, on the issue of height, setback, and standards. If that's something you want to look at in the short term, as staff prepares a packet potentially for council in the next month, or is that something you want to look at in sort of this longer term look that we're discussing? Hopefully that was clear.
Yeah, frankly, I'm flexible with that. I can go either way. I know that's not helpful when it comes to the landfill. For other, if we're gonna, if and when we extend it to other parts of Scarborough, I'd like to see that done. And I guess that's my only question is, do we just move this forward as is with the landfill, then go back and work, or do we do that, the height and whatever now too? That sound right? Dawn, go ahead.
Could we move forward with the landfill and also Mr. Larry's proposal? He seems like he's ready to go. I know he's in a different zone,
Right.
but maybe we run those two things through together, and that could help us solve for the other 3 or 4 zones. Anyway, I don't want to hold someone back if they're ready to go, but it does seem to me that trying to do this in a big bang, it gives me some concern.
So I do believe that Mr. Larry is in the RF rural farming zone as similar to where the Kimberly Clark is. So it's getting, yeah, I need to figure out how we slice that. I mean, we could look at the lot size, but if we say RF of a certain lot size, then that certainly opens up other potential.
Right.
You know, it sounds like committee members are maybe even heading towards an overlay zone for 2 particular properties. However, now I'm really not sure how you craft it so you're not quite creating a spot zone for 2 particular properties where, you know, clearly with a capped landfill, we're creating a category of users. There may only be a few of those, but it is a category of users. You're not identifying. So that's where I understand the desire, and certainly staff can think a bit harder about that. And I'm sure we can come up with something. It just, I'll stop there for right now.
Right, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I beg to differ with Councilor Hamel. This is, and again, I'm here to learn, listen and learn. Again, this is, to me, is a classic case of contract zone. So tell me the argument against that. Somebody, anybody.
Well, contract zones, you shouldn't be overusing them. I know that.
Well, it's not, but contract zone is you cannot do the business that you want to do in the zone that you are in because it's a non-permitted use.
Tom, go ahead and speak to it because you be more concise with it than I would.
I'm not so sure of that, but you know, what I heard at the outset is a universal support of this as a concept. And if that's true, it does take some work, but with thought and careful planning, I think it's preferable to create a set of land use regulations that allow the use within the parameters that you're comfortable. I think the contract zone route is not intentionally, but has the potential of picking winners and losers. I think it bogs down the town council's process, frankly. I don't know that the council needs to touch all of these and understand all the particulars. If the premise is this is a good use and we have thoughtful land use standards and performance standards to make certain of that, the planning board and staff is eminently capable of executing that. So I guess that's the argument against. I'm trying to protect you against yourself, Ken.
Yeah, and contract zoning to me is it should be the exceptional exception, because contract zoning, quite frankly, is legal spot zoning. It really is. And I know the intent of the legislature is you should be using it very, very, very infrequently. So to go back to where Dawn was at, while I get that Mr. Larry's, raring to go, and I'm sure we'll be able to work something out, I would just assume let's stick with this piece with the landfill because it's a whole different ball of wax. And then work on allowing others like Mr. Larry or others potentially to move forward. But that's me. Dawn.
Yeah, I support kind of where the conversation is going. I'm not trying to pick a fight with Ken. I like contract zones, but I believe they should be used for exceptions rather than rules. And if we're at the stage of trying to define the rule, we should put our energy there for these zones if possible, and then fall back to the contract zones where necessary.
Mm-hmm. Tom, go ahead.
I think staff can probably turn around the sort of things, the additional discussion points fairly quickly in time for your next meeting. So I guess the question I'd pose, I don't know how urgent the landfill projects are. I know they're further along in planning and maybe even execution. So maybe time is imminent, but if not the case, an extra month could really benefit this conversation. I don't think the conversation is terribly difficult. And I think we could probably advance a number of those things and provide some options to you at your next meeting, if
Yeah.
time will allow.
Well, our next meeting isn't going to be till August
Right,
because the chair is unavailable.
right,
Well,
Okay.
the two remaining members can meet.
correct.
Well, they can. I mean, that's true, but I'm just saying. We had talked about waiting till August.
So can anyone answer the question, which is simply how urgent are these landfill projects?
I know Mr. Mazurowski mentioned it in I think it was a memo that it doesn't need to be done right this minute, but it's, if I recall, it's by the end of the year. And Nick Mazurowski, do you mind raising your hand? Do you mind answering that question for us, please? Can you bring Nick in for me? Thanks.
Hi, folks. Nick Mazurowski from Dirigo Solar.
Hi, Nick.
Thanks.
Yeah, could you talk
Hey.
to us about the time frame that you guys are under?
Yeah, so the legislature last week enacted modifications to how community solar farms are governed, which our project on the landfill is qualified as a community program, which allows us to sell it to homes, businesses, and as you mentioned, Counselor, the Scarborough School Department. So the requirement is we have to have the CMP process completed, but more importantly, and on point to this, is we need to have the municipal permit in hand by the end of this year. So fully appreciate your methodology and the approach, and I think it's a really good one. But respectfully, time is of the essence for our project.
Anyone have any questions for Nick while I've got him here?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that.
Thanks very much, and really appreciate all your work.
Okay, thank you. So, gentlemen, what would you like to do? Dawn's playing with computers over there, I guess. What are you
Yeah.
doing, Dawn?
No, it's got a bad signal. I don't know what the problem is.
Tom's got his hand up.
I'm sorry, Tom. I missed you. Sorry.
Just from a policy perspective, with all due respect to Nick's comments just a moment ago, and I don't know what the effect of this will have, but it sounds like there's a level of interest and commitment to kind of work through this fairly quickly. I think, the summer months will slow us down slightly, but I think it's best policy to do this right the first time, as opposed to doing one piece and then coming back as soon as this fall, presumably, to amend the same thing. That just does not make sense to me. So I would recommend you take the time to do this right the first time.
I have a question for Jay. Jay, in your office or anywhere, do you have a nice map between somebody? I'm a visual, we're making decisions, because again, when I hear rule, I still see houses along the farm lines. Okay, I have a concern about that. I'd like to see a map about where these things are being proposed, and I only have to see it once, but I'd like to see it. Do you have anything in your office that I could come in and look at, or?
Yep, we sure do. Yep, and just for what it's worth, and I know with the new website, it's on there somewhere, but our online GIS mapping also has our zoning map, so you can see it from home, but we certainly do have a paper map, which I know is easier for some folks to look
Yeah,
at.
and
So,
it's
yep.
larger, right?
Yep.
Are you there tomorrow?
I am here for part of the day tomorrow, but our office is open till 4, and it's hanging on the wall right behind Robin's desk and in our conference room. So
And
Any
Ken,
old
there's
time,
one under
yep.
the glass. There's one under the glass here in my conference room. You can come anytime you like, spend as long as you like.
Okay.
Looking at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one that's down in the planning is really big, Ken. So that's a real good visual
Yeah.
for you. So, So I appreciate that. So am I hearing then that we're gonna ask staff to go back and give us some verbiage and bring it back to us at our next meeting in August? Is that correct?
So I guess I still would have a few policy directive questions if we're going to try to craft verbiage. Again, sort of part of, I already talked a little bit, starting to hear some of the areas that we might have concerns about locating solar farms, or ordinance committee members might have. I also started to hear maybe some indication about looking at lot size. I think Jamie, chime in, but I think, right, the minimum, basically, if someone's going to try to get a solar farm, they're going to need at least 5 acres, if I recall you telling me, Jamie, is that right?
It's roughly 5 acres per megawatt, and most of the places are trying to shoot for just under 5 megawatts. So we're looking at 25 acres.
Okay, so 25 acres, it seems to be at least a starting point for maximizing that capacity. And so I guess a question to the committee is there, to one of Ken's earlier points about buffering, right? How much buffering is the committee interested in? And is 25 acres, and certainly we can represent on a map where 25 acre lots are. And so we can start there. And
That would
that's
help.
a way. Okay.
That would really
We
help.
already do.
So starting with a 25 acre parameter, it seems I'm seeing nodding heads, and we'll start there and see what that looks like. Okay.
Yeah, is the South Tower 20 or 25 acres, Jay?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The cell tower, is that 20 or 25 acres? I'm thinking
Yes.
25. I'm thinking 25 is sticking in my head. And the only reason I'm asking that is you may already have something that's identified a lot of those lots, so you aren't starting from scratch.
I believe it's 20 acres, but.
Okay, I
we'll
could
see.
be wrong. All right.
I
Okay.
hate to correct my boss, but it's 25 acres.
Ah,
Man, yeah. No,
And I don't hate it at all.
okay. All right. So that will be good. I think that's a good start too, right there is, yeah.
We can produce that.
Anything else, gentlemen? So do we
And
want
that shall statement,
the what?
the shall statements.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, and I mean, I agree. I'm just looking at the planning board is not a meeting that I like to watch because too much for me, too much detail. But Jay, what's the difference and how does is that something the planning board's going to have a heartache over if we say they shall as opposed to the extent possible?
Honestly, it's really I think it's a policy direction from council and what the elected leaders want, because really the difference being the language as written does provide flexibility for the planning board based on site characteristics. So what's nice about the language as written is it sets what the expectation is. However, again, based on site characteristics, it does provide for flexibility. What's nice about what's being proposed by Councilor Johnson, that's it. The planning board has no play. It's done. And so it makes the planning board's job a lot easier, but it doesn't take into account, things that we can't contemplate. So, I'll leave it there and let members decide what the best policy would be.
Dawn, what do you think? I'm fine with that shall. That's good to me. The clearer, the better.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. And then the last one, Ken, was that you want to see 50-foot setback regardless of what the zone says? Ken?
Well, I don't want to frame it that way. Again, I thought 20 across the board was not liberal enough. Okay? again, it's that set it, forget it concept that I've got.
It strikes me a 50-foot setback is not unreasonable. If you're talking a minimum 25-acre site,
Right.
I would think that that will be easily accomplished.
Right.
Well, that's where
You
I
would
was
think
gonna
so. Yeah, and I was actually, when I was thinking about it, I was only thinking of 5 acres, so. But you're right, 25 acres, you should be able to slide 50 feet in there, buffering to your neighbor quite easily.
Yep. Yep.
And then we'll also research and perhaps be able to provide some language around the utility sign off. I know I'm not saying that right, but certification that utility is able and willing to take this power.
Right. And Jay, about the height, I mean, that was more of a reaction because of what I heard. Can you think of, will that be too constrained? Would there be a reason to go 35 feet high?
I might ask Jamie to answer that. She's really been more in touch with the technical folks or the providers. So I'll ask Jamie to weigh in.
Many of the ordinances that I reviewed and pulling this together, it said 35 feet. So that's why I went with that. We did hear on site that 20 feet has become more of the standard. So I don't see any problem with changing that.
Okay.
All right.
Do we have enough to work with, Jay?
I think I'm generally hearing 20 is
Yes.
that's where we'll come back to you with.
Yeah, I think in total we have sufficient policy direction to rework this and bring back a revised draft.
And additional materials, mapping and the like. Yep.
Good, thank you for that.
Now the chair is frozen. Who do you guys have for a service provider?
Is it almost back?
Back?
We can hear you now, I think. Or not.
I'm channeling Jean Marie now. I suspect she is moving on to the marijuana establishing licensing ordinance.
Yeah, she's nodding. She's nodding.
All right. Well, why don't we do that? So just to refresh everyone's memory, last meeting we had some discussion around specifically odor mitigation changes to the ordinance, which I can highlight here. And there was a formal motion to bring those changes back to council. So I think that there are a few subtle changes, that there's a typo in there. I think that we went with required instead of responsible. And I think it probably just cleaned up a few other things, but that's largely what we discussed and approved and what the committee approved last time on around section 10, subpart 7, A and B. So I don't think that requires any further. I'd recommend that we just bring that to council as already kind of adopted and approved. The changes that we had some discussion on last time, if you recall, was around two issues. One, the concept of administrative review and approval of renewal licenses, and also one of the kind of recent challenges around sort of de minimis or non-substantive changes to existing applications and allowing staff to approve those. So I spoke with Jay earlier this week about some of the language or the concepts that he had done around administrative or staff site plan reviews, and kind of what the language was that they used there, and kind of what the mechanism was. So Just looking at, so again, a few that just going right down chronologically through the changes. In the event we wanted to consider an application change, I have proposed a limited fee here because it may require, it likely will require either a brief follow-up inspection or some other administrative time to confirm whatever that change is. And again, these would be, the ones that we've seen come forward. We had some people, we received 2 or 3 now suggestions that existing licensed applicants aren't changing what they're doing. They're medical cultivators. They're continuing to do that. There's no change to their LLC or license name. There's no really even expansion of their operation. But by virtue of some of these facilities that they're in, as they kind of grow and expand, maybe they're expanding into the next suite over at Snow Canning Road or at a Pleasant Hill Road facility. And so it's effectively a change from their floor plan, but there's really no other change. And so right now there's just no mechanism to update the file or make that change. And so again, it's somewhat, there's obviously some subjectivity to what amounts to a de minimis or non-substantive change. But certainly this would not be a change that otherwise violates portions of the ordinance. So this would not be a change in ownership. This would not be a fundamental change to an LLC. This would not be, an expansion of an existing operation. Someone want to go from a tier 1 to a tier 2 cultivation, adult use cultivation facility, that would require a new license. So, so that's just that proposed change here is just speaking to a proposed nominal fee to handle those pieces. Subsection D is where we talk about renewal applications. And so I think a few things I just want to point out here. So essentially a renewal application will follow the same application, same standards. However, existing applicants in good standing with no substantive changes to the original application may be approved by the town manager or their designee, so long as all other criteria and requirements outlined in this section and section 10 have been met. So that's that would be the proposal. There's still the intention behind the following amendment: the town, as part of the renewal process, shall consider compliance from prior years, and based upon that review, may recommend conditions to any future license to correct, abate, or limit past problems to forward to the town council. So I think that we'd still like to retain the ability for any of these ones that perhaps there's been some concerns with odor or with some other issues, that we still reserve the right to, because that likely wouldn't be an applicant in good standing. I'll kind of reserve the right to bring it back to the council for public hearing and action with possible conditions applied. So that's the intention behind that language and that change.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
We can.
Darn Spectrum.
Have you heard the discussion or the outline so far?
Yes, I've been hearing everything fine, so thank you.
So carrying this through, section 3 here, town council should have the authority to approve license and renewal applications, and just carved out subject to the exception outlined in 7D above, again, where there's a staff piece. And then a new subpart 4, the town manager or designee with the endorsement of the council chair. So when I looked at the site plan review piece, there are kind of 2 components to it. It was, I think, upon approval of the town planner with consultation of the planning board chair. So again, there's still the ability or the requirement to put an elected official in the loop on what amounts to, again, a de minimis change in existing. Okay.
Good.
And I think, and then this is the stuff we've already seen. So those are the additional changes that speak to administrative review. Again, I think that if you recall, the sensitivity was just, these are all going to come back for renewal in the fall. And if we don't modify our process, the council is going to again have public hearing action for the probably 3 or 4 months on all these renewal applications. And while I don't expect there will be the same level of controversy, or at least I hope there won't be, it still takes up a tremendous amount of the council's time and attention.
Mm-hmm. Dawn, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the other issue is that makes the public think that we're expanding the number of licenses when in fact these are routine renewals.
Right. It doesn't change the process for any new application or new entity. You know, if someone, let's say there's an operation, this happens, where ownership changes over, that's still coming to the council for a public hearing and approval, even if it's an existing operation. It's only for those that are status quo. The same applicants come before the council. They've done their public hearing. They've been reviewed. They've been approved by the council. Those are the ones we're saying they don't need to come back again. I still think that with how much movement there is in the industry right now in terms of changing over of suites and ownership and et cetera, the council is still going to have their fair share of people to take a look at.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with this wording going right to council. I don't think we need to do anything to it. Someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we take as written and move to the full council.
Do I have a second?
Second,
And we will take a vote. Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Hamel,
yes.
Ms. Katarina is a yes. So we'll just move that right up to council. That was easy.
Again, thank you, Liam. Thank you for
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
I do apologize for the very late distribution of it. We got a lot of moving pieces going on in town right now.
Really?
Just a few.
So I have us as meeting August the 19th at 4 o'clock. That's the third Thursday. It happens to be my birthday, so we will meet
Happy
in
birthday.
person because we'll be under that new dictum of the state. You pass the 30 days past the emergency. So it will be an in-person meeting, but I'm assuming, and we need to work on this, that the people, that the people who wish to testify and whatever can still come in remotely, Tom? Is that how that's gonna work? If they want, if they wish, they don't have to be here in person. It's us, the elected officials.
That's right. We'll essentially run a hybrid meeting. The expectation and the rule going forward would be the elected officials. The rule is for them to, the expectation is for them to be present in person, but for some extenuating circumstance.
Yeah.
But the public will be able to participate remotely.
Okay, good, cool. So let's put that in our calendars, 4 o'clock, the 19th of August. And is there any other business, Mr. Hamel? Or
No, I just look forward to us having some cake at the very next in-person meeting. So
Yeah,
celebrate your birthday.
I prefer chocolate. So if someone's bringing chocolate cake, that would be.
Okay.
You want a chocolate gummy? Did you say that? No.
Did you have a question?
January. Put it on your calendar, please. Do not forget the 29th at 4 p.m. to review RFPs.
Oh, I've got you.
Thank you.
Got us down. We're good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Let's take a vote. Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Hamel,
yes.
Ms. Katarina, is a yes. Let's let all these fine employees of the town of Scarborough go home.
Bye.
Amen.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.